Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining me for today's workshop. I'm going to give everyone else just a couple more minutes to get signed on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And while we're waiting, if anyone feels comfortable, I encourage you to enter your name in the chat box if you have a nickname that you go by, so we can all get to know each other. And if you feel comfortable sharing something about yourself, like your favorite fruit or vegetable, that way we can all just become more familiar. Hi, Tandy. So for those of you that are just joining, we're waiting for everyone else to get logged on. And in the meantime, I just asked everyone to share their name or nickname in the chat and their favorite fruit or vegetable. Yeah. All right, we'll get started in about 1 minute. All right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining me today. My name is Ailar. If you don't know me, I'm the functional nutritionist here at Pacific Integrative Psychiatry. I'll explain a little bit about my background and what I do. So basically, I'm a certified clinical functional nutritionist. I got my bachelor's degree in molecular and cell biology. And how I got involved in nutrition is at the time I was really interested in the brain and how the brain works. And after completing my bachelor's degree, I started investigating a bit more about the gut and the gut health. And I started learning more about it being referred to as our second brain, which was very interesting to me. And this is when I was introduced to my master's program through University of Western States, where I studied more about human nutrition and functional medicine. So now I've been practicing through a functional medicine approach to help treat the root cause of chronic diseases and conditions with a big emphasis on gut health. All right, so a little bit more information about what you can expect from these workshops. So I'll be hosting a live session every fourth Wednesday of the month, and it will be at 6 p.m. at the same time, Pacific Standard Time via Zoom. Today, we'll be talking about an introduction to functional nutrition, ways that we can support our gut. And I always encourage participation. If anyone feels comfortable, I'll ask you to participate either by raising your hand or by typing in the chat. At the end of the workshop, I'll open it up to question from you guys, and I'll be answering your individual questions. A couple rules to keep in mind as we go through the workshop. Please listen when other people are speaking, respect each other's privacy, and if possible, try to put away any distractions. All right, so who can benefit from this workshop? Anyone who's interested in learning about how to have a better digestion. Maybe you want to experience less bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain. If you're interested in learning more about the gut and its function or role in the body, if you want to learn more about causes of metabolic imbalances or how to achieve weight loss, if you're interested in improving your energy levels and decreasing things like brain fog or fatigue, if you want to optimize your gut health through making lifestyle and nutrition modifications, and lastly, learning about how to utilize nutrition to help fight the underlying cause of chronic mental and physical conditions, a lot of which can start in the gut. So here's a little bit about the outline of today's workshop. So first, we'll talk about the connection between the gut and the brain and how they're related. We'll talk about the gut microbiome and what it can really do for our bodies. We'll also talk about how nutrition and our diet can help support our gut health. We'll talk about factors that might be harmful for our gut health and digestion. And we'll briefly talk about common triggers for things like gas, constipation, bloating. And then at the end of the workshop, I'll ask you guys to let me know your questions. And I do have a couple questions that people emailed, so I'll go over those as well. All right, so before I get started, I just want everyone to do a quick mindful check-in about how you're feeling today. So you probably received an email with a handout with some questions that had you reflect on some of these things. But the questions involve, how is your gut feeling today? So I want everyone to just check in with their gut. If you want to put your hand over your gut or your belly and just see how you're feeling. How is your digestion? Have you had any bowel movements today? And what were those like? Did you experience things like gas, bloating, constipation, abdominal pain? Were they severe, not very severe? How are your energy levels? Are you feeling energized? Are you feeling tired? Do you have brain fog? And how do you think your mental health affects your digestion and your gut health, and vice versa? How does your gut health affect your mental health? So as we all take a couple minutes to reflect, does anyone feel comfortable sharing their answer to any of these questions? And you can either raise your hand or you can enter it in the chat box. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Allison, for sharing. So SIBO for 3 years, doing better, but not easy. Yes, definitely. So SIBO has become very common. And for those of you that don't know, SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And a lot of symptoms include things like bloating, constipation, gas, and it can even trigger your mental health, and it can become very chronic. Yeah, Vanna, bloating. Yes, definitely. So thank you for sharing. And the important thing here to notice is that you're not alone, right? A lot of us have digestive issues, and a lot of things through our diet and lifestyle can affect the gut health. But this doesn't mean that we can't help heal the gut through making some of these changes in our diet and lifestyle. So now we'll talk a little bit more about how we can do that. So first, I want to distinguish between the difference of a functional medicine versus conventional medicine approach. So conventional medicine is what most doctors practice today at hospitals, or if you go see your primary care provider. But in a functional medicine approach, which we practice at Pacific Integrative Psychiatry, our focus is to determine the root cause of chronic conditions. Versus in a conventional medicine approach, it's more of treating symptoms, or what's referred to as the Band-Aid method, right? So just covering it up. The functional medicine approach treats the whole body or the whole individual and looks at the body as a system of integrated networks, versus the conventional medicine treats specific organs or body parts. In functional medicine, diet and nutrition play a very central role, but in conventional medicine, there's little to no focus on diet and nutrition. Functional medicine uses diet, exercise, lifestyle as a first step approach. So those are often the first things that we start taking into consideration and modifying. Versus in conventional medicine, you might find that the first approach is going to be through medications and adding medications into your lifestyle, which usually leads to several downstream side effects as a result. In functional medicine, we have a patient-centered approach, versus in conventional medicine, the focus is more on the disease. And lastly, functional medicine is very effective for long-term and chronic care because we are looking at the root cause, versus in conventional medicine, it's more effective for acute care or in the case of emergencies. Okay. Yes, I'm just looking at the chat right now. We will be recording the presentation and we will send an email to everyone. And yes, Mira, thank you for sharing your answer as well. All right, so now looking a bit more at what is the gut microbiome, right? So a lot of us have heard of this term microbiome, but what is it really? So the microbiome is within our gut, and it consists of a variety of microorganisms. It's not just bacteria, but also other microbes and fungi. It's important to know that the bacteria cells in the body actually outnumber the human cells. There's approximately 40 trillion bacteria cells in the body versus 30 trillion human cells. The gut microbiome can be impacted by the pH, or how acidic or basic the environment is. It can be affected by our diet, our nutrition. It can be impacted by your exercise or level of physical activity, your stress levels, if you're taking certain types of medications. Even your sleep quality can affect the gut microbiome. And now it's really important to understand why a gut microbiome is having a healthy gut microbiome is essential for our overall physical and mental health. So we'll talk a bit more about that now. So a lot of us just think of the gut as a digestive organ, right? But the gut is also responsible for making a lot of hormones and neurotransmitters. For example, about 95% of the serotonin is actually produced in the gut. And for those of you that may not know, serotonin is a neurotransmitter, which is responsible for making us feel happy, right? So you might notice that if you eat a certain type of food, it makes you feel happy, makes you feel good, and vice versa. Certain types of foods can actually make you feel tired, fatigued, low energy, and that's because of what's really going on in the gut and how it's signaling the brain. Additionally, there's about 400 times more melatonin produced in the gut than the pineal gland of the brain. Now, melatonin is a hormone that's responsible for our sleep. So it's kind of shocking to hear that what's going on in the gut can really affect our sleep quality, our sleep onset, and how well we sleep. Now, as many of you know, the gut health is really important for our proper digestion. So preventing things like dysbiosis, leaky gut, other digestive issues, a lot of which have to do with imbalances between the good and the bad bacteria in the gut, the lining of the gut, if it's been disrupted, or there might be holes or tears in it, and how we can help support that and heal it. The gut health is also important for our immune system. So about 70% of the immune system is actually in the gut. So this is why having proper nutrition, eating a healthy diet can actually help us fight so many chronic diseases, infections, especially things like COVID right now. So our gut health is really important for that. And lastly, having a healthy gut environment can help us fight inflammation. And inflammation is now one of the main root causes of so many chronic conditions, not just physically, but also mentally. And it can also trigger a lot of metabolic imbalances as well. All right, so now we're going to look at a bit more for what's really damaging the gut. And the main focus today will be on the diet, but I'll mention a few other factors as well. So when it comes to diet, a lot of the food that we see nowadays in the grocery stores are processed and packaged foods. And these foods contain several additives, chemicals that are actually hazardous for us and not regulated by the FDA. There's emulsifiers, preservatives, refined sugars in very high quantities. There's also inflammatory components in our foods, things like GMOs, genetically modified organisms, things like manufactured gluten, dairy, certain types of oils like peanut oil or seed oils that have been refined and can cause inflammation in the body. The gut can also be damaged by a lack of fiber. So the fiber is found in a variety of fruits and vegetables, whole grain products like quinoa, nuts, seeds, right? So the fiber is really important for the lining of the gut, and it can help prevent some of these chronic conditions or digestive issues. And without the fiber, we're not able to have a proper bowel movement. And dehydration as well. So our bodies are about 60 to 70% made up of water, right? So the majority of the body is just water. And without the water, we can't really properly do a lot of these functions like making healthy bowel movement, having proper digestion, blood circulation, distributing the nutrients in the body. And a lot of people notice that when they are dehydrated, they have symptoms of bloating, constipation. Some people notice fatigue or brain fog. And these are very common signs of dehydration, especially if you consume caffeinated beverages like coffee and tea throughout the day, which can severely dehydrate you. Now, the gut can also be damaged from infections like bacterial and fungal infections, which we can test for through stool samples, blood samples. High stress levels, especially chronic stress over time, can really damage the gut. Poor sleep quality as well. Certain types of medications, if you've ever been on antibiotics to treat an infection, if you've taken non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, PPIs, other medications that can really damage the gut. And lastly, environmental toxins like mold and air pollutants can also over time damage the gut. All right, so now looking at a bit more what can help heal the gut, right? So we talked about factors that can damage the gut. So how can we really heal the gut to prevent these digestive issues from happening? So the first thing we'll talk about are probiotics. So for those of you that may not know, probiotics are actually the healthy bacteria that we need in the gut to do proper functions like digestion, having a healthy environment to produce the hormones and neurotransmitters we talked about. And probiotics can be either found through supplements, which you can get over the counter or online, or they can be found in certain types of foods like fermented foods, like sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh. Now, our body digests these slightly different, and getting them in a supplement form acts a bit differently than getting them through the food form, right? So it's important to know what your body really needs and giving it the proper type of probiotics and the proper strain of probiotics. It's not necessarily the best approach to start with probiotics for a lot of people, especially if you have an ongoing infection like SIBO or some yeast infections or fungal infections. And what people notice is that when they introduce the probiotics, their symptoms actually worsen, right? So until we get rid of the infection and we actually help eliminate it, the probiotics may not be able to do their job properly. Now, the prebiotics, these are the fiber foods that the probiotic bacteria feed on, right? So the probiotics are kind of like the seed. We put the seed, we plant it, but without the food, without the nutrients, they're not able to grow and thrive to create a healthy gut environment. So oftentimes I would recommend a combination of pre and probiotic supplements together. That way we're putting the good bacteria in there, plus we're giving them the food that they need to grow and thrive. Same thing with the prebiotics. You can get them in supplement forms. There's certain powders that you can use as a prebiotic, or you can get prebiotics through certain types of foods like asparagus, artichoke, plantains, garlic and onions. Now, lastly, what can help heal the gut are polyphenols. So polyphenols are basically plant-based micronutrients that can be found in a variety of fruits and vegetables. And what happens is these fiber foods actually help with the lining of the gut. They help us form a healthy bowel movement, and they provide a lot of additional nutrients that the body needs to help heal the gut. Let me see, we have a chat question. Yes, yeah, we'll talk about the FODMAPs as well, Allison. Okay, so I just want to kind of recap what we've talked about so far. Oh, sorry. So far we talked about why gut health is really important. So our gut health helps our overall digestion. It helps our hormone neurotransmitter production, helps our immune system fighting infections, and can help with fighting inflammation in the body, which is often a root cause of so many chronic conditions. We talked about some factors that can damage the gut, such as processed foods, inflammatory foods, not having enough fiber in the diet, being dehydrated, having high levels of stress or poor sleep quality, and certain types of medications and toxins. We talked about what can help heal the gut, and this is mostly by having a whole foods diet, right? So trying to limit as much as possible a lot of processed packaged foods, instead choosing lean plant-based sources of protein, variety of fruits and vegetables, whole grain products, and making sure that you're getting the pre and probiotics in your diet if necessary to help heal the gut environment. Staying hydrated is also very important. So we talked about the body is about 60 to 70% made up of water. On average, adult women require about 2.5 liters of water a day, which is about 10 to 11 cups or 80 to 90 ounces. And adult men require about 3.5 liters of water a day, which is equivalent to about 120 ounces or 15 cups of water a day, right? So this really puts it into perspective about how much water our body really needs to do its proper functions. And then lastly, I recommend checking nutrition labels. It doesn't always come down to looking at grams of sugar, grams of carbohydrates, fats, but really where are these sugars and carbohydrates coming from? And the ingredients are what tell us that, right? So looking at what's in the food, where are the sugars coming from? And making sure that you understand the majority of the ingredients that are in your food. That's how we can know if it's healthy for us. The first ingredient in the list is usually what's in highest quantity in the food. So if the first ingredient is sugar, that means that the product is mostly made up of sugars, right? So really paying attention to the ingredient list and not looking at labels that say things like necessarily gluten-free or vegan, which can be a little bit tricky and used more as an advertising method. And lastly, making home cooked meals can definitely help reduce a lot of these added ingredients, preservatives, sugars, right? Inflammatory components into our food. When we make home cooked meals, they're often healthier. We make a lot of ingredients from scratch using less added oils, salts, sugars, so they can be much healthier for us. So here's what you can do to actually help heal your gut, right? So first, I want everyone to know that nutrition is so personalized, right? Everyone's nutrition is different, what our bodies need, how we can actually help support our body physically and mentally. So it's really important to take a look at your body and analyze it a bit more to see how you can help support the gut. It's important to make nutrition a priority in your day, right? When are you eating? Are you actually taking time to eat your meals? Are you sitting down, right? Are you taking time to put healthy ingredients into your food? It's really important to also listen to your body's signals and cues. So you are going to be the best judge of what works for your body because your body is communicating with you. It's telling you when you're full, right? When you're hungry. It's giving you signals of constipation, bloating, right? A reaction to a specific type of food that you might be having. I recommend setting specific and short-term goals. So whenever it comes to making changes in your diet, lifestyle, it's really important to start with very small changes. And I like to use this acronym that's called SMART, right? So SMART stands for setting a goal that's first very specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's timely. Right? So as an example, if I'm someone who's not drinking a lot of water, let's say I'm having 1 cup of water a day, and my goal is to get to that 10, 11 cups of water a day. As a realistic goal or as a SMART goal, I might say I'm going to have 1 more cup of water each day for the next 7 days, right? That's a goal that's more achievable for me, and it's being achieved in a short period of time rather than trying to get to that 10 cups within a week. And then lastly, considering talking to a functional nutritionist, if that's something that you're interested in, to get a more holistic evaluation of your gut health, where you're at, what your specific needs are. All right, so I'll take a couple questions now, just to, so I'm first going to be looking at some of the questions that I got in the emails, and then I'll move on to questions in the chat box. So if anyone has a question right now, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I'll scroll up and answer some of the earlier questions as well. Let me just stop sharing my screen. All right, perfect. So the first question that I got was about acid reflux, right? So for those of you that may not know, acid reflux is when the stomach acid actually starts to come up, right? It's not necessarily an overproduction of acid in your digestive tract, but it just means that the acid is traveling the wrong way. So people start to notice the feeling up in their chest. A lot of people notice heartburn, right? That feeling of tightness in your chest. And this can be triggered by certain types of foods. So it's different for everyone, but generally a lot of acidic foods trigger this. Things like alcohol, caffeine, fried food, tomato-based foods like a pasta sauce, for example, right? So these are the acidic foods that can trigger this acid. There's also certain lifestyle modifications that can help with acid reflux. So as an example, people find that when they eat very quickly, that also causes the stomach acid to come up, right? The body's not able to properly digest the food and absorb it in a short period of time if we're eating so quickly. If we're eating large portions, a lot of people find that if they skip meals, they're more likely to have a larger portion. They eat that meal much more quickly, and that causes some of the acid reflux or heartburn. If you lie down very quickly after a meal, right? So not allowing your body about 2 hours to properly digest the food before you lie down causes the stomach acid to also come up. There are a lot of potential root causes of why this might be going on, which is what I would recommend working on. Some of them include if you're overweight, if you have an intolerance or sensitivity to a certain food. Some medications can worsen acid reflux. If you have low stomach acid, it can also trigger it. And if there's some sort of infection going on, like SIBO, or if there's some sort of dysbiosis or imbalance in the gut as well. Okay. So I hope that answers that question. Another question I got was, is sparkling water as good as drinking regular water, right? So a lot of people nowadays are switching to sparkling water. They find that the natural flavors are more enjoyable rather than having to drink plain water. So basically, sparkling water is just pressurized water with carbon dioxide, right? That's what produces the bubbles in there. So the sparkling water will help you stay hydrated, just as water will do. So a lot of people find that they do achieve their hydration goal by drinking sparkling water. What I do recommend is, again, paying attention to the ingredients. So first of all, it's hard to know the source of the water when we're drinking sparkling water. We don't really know where the water comes from. And is it a clean source of water? Where is it sourced and where is it coming from? Sometimes there will be sugars or sugar alcohols, which I would recommend avoiding. And if you see the label natural flavors, that's also a not very regulated term by the FDA. So a lot of times there will be some processed ingredients to give the sparkling water a taste that's enjoyable to us, versus if you do see those specific ingredients like lemon or cucumber, that's often going to be a healthier source. And lastly, some people with certain GI issues like IBS find that drinking too much sparkling water can actually trigger their symptoms of bloating and gas due to the bubbles that are in the sparkling water. Okay. All right. So just going to go up here a little bit. So just referring to Allison's comment as far as the low FODMAPs. So for anyone that may not know, so people with IBS, or what's referred to as irritable bowel syndrome, which is an umbrella term for anyone who just has a digestive system when it comes to so many different foods, right? You might have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, right? And not really know what's causing it. And that's when you go to your doctor, they do a lot of tests, and if they don't find anything specific, they might just give you this diagnosis of IBS. And basically, in the case of IBS, there are certain bacteria in the gut that like to live off of certain sugars or carbohydrates, which are referred to as the FODMAPs. So FODMAP stands for certain types of sugars like fructose, oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharide, right? So as we feed these bacteria more of these carbohydrates or sugars that they like to live off of, they start producing their gases, leading to a lot of these symptoms like the gas, the bloating, right? So when we eliminate these foods, we starve the bacteria of their food, and that's what can really help the gut get some time to heal itself. And at that time, we want to support the gut with nutrients, potentially pre and probiotics. So that's referring to Allison's comment about the low FODMAPs. Kirtana, could you please give us another? Yes. So yeah, so When it comes to brain fog, so brain fog is, again, one of those general symptoms that, again, we really have to investigate to figure out the root cause of these, right? So where is the brain fog coming from? Is it coming from a food sensitivity, for example, right? So some people find that if they're very sensitive to things like gluten or dairy, they'll experience digestive issues along with brain fog. So for someone in that example, if their goal is to eliminate gluten, I generally don't recommend doing it all at once. So I say eliminating one product at a time, depending on what's common in your diet. For example, if you're eating bread, maybe this week your goal is to substitute a gluten-free bread into your breakfast every morning for the next week. Right? Rather than saying, I'm going to eliminate gluten over the next month, you can say, I'm going to substitute a gluten-free alternative into my breakfast for the next 7 days. Kirtana, I hope that answers your question. If you want me to explain it a bit more, please. Perfect. All right, great. Okay, let's talk about straight sparkling spring filtered water, not with additives. Yeah, exactly. So without the additives, the sparkling water is okay. You can use it as a substitute for regular water if there's no additives, natural flavors, preservatives, and all of that. But again, if you do notice that just by making this substitute into sparkling water, you are experiencing more bloating, gas, that could be a sign of IBS. And that's just something to look out for. Perfect, Tam. All right, great. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so I'm just scrolling up here and I'm seeing Mira's comment. I've taken 2 courses of antibiotics for H. pylori. Now I am negative, but have lots of gas and bloating. Yeah. So basically, in the case of an infection like H. pylori, or even in the case of SIBO, if you have a lot of digestive issues like bloating and gas, taking an antibiotic is the correct approach because that's what's needed to help eliminate the infection and the bad bacteria that are causing it. Now, once we do that, the antibiotics also tend to get rid of the good bacteria, right? And that's why people find that despite some resolution in their symptoms, they still continue to experience things like gas, bloating. They find that their symptoms are initially better, but then they start to get worse again. So it's kind of like a relapse. And that's because we haven't really treated the root cause of what's going on. And that has to do with an imbalance or something else that's going on in the gut. So in the case of antibiotics, what a lot of conventional medicine doctors won't talk about is how we can support the gut as you're coming off of the antibiotics. So when we take away the antibiotics, the gut is left very sensitive, very permeable, and that's why the symptoms start to occur again. So typically in that case, supporting the gut with a good probiotic as you're coming off of the antibiotic, typically on the last day, can be very helpful. Now this may not work for everyone, but in most cases, incorporating a good pre and probiotic can help with reducing some of those symptoms. If there's another thing going on besides the H. pylori, it's important to investigate that, see if there's a food sensitivity, right? Is there another underlying infection? Is there dysbiosis? Is there an imbalance between the good and the bad bacteria, right? Figuring out other root causes. And some of these stool tests or blood tests can help us determine that. All right. So Megan, in regards to dairy, is sheep and goat dairy less inflammatory than cow? Yeah, that's a great question. So I know that nowadays, a lot of labeling like gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan have been very attractive, right? This doesn't necessarily mean that they're healthier for us, right? So especially if someone doesn't have a sensitivity to dairy or gluten, I never recommend eliminating it. If you are looking for more of an anti-inflammatory diet, and let's say the gluten is an inflammatory component of your diet, then in that case, we might recommend an elimination. But in the case of producing less inflammation, I do recommend looking for labels like grass-fed if you're choosing any type of dairy product. This means that the animal has been fed a healthier diet, producing a healthier source of meat, healthier source of dairy, right? Versus conventional dairy. A lot of times animals will be fed grains or corn, which produces a more inflammatory type of dairy or meat. Now, a lot of people who have sensitivity to dairy find that they're able to digest sheep and goat products more easily because of less of the lactose component that's in there. So just because you're able to digest it better doesn't mean that it's less inflammatory. And having more grass-fed products can actually be beneficial, plus providing additional protein and nutrients for your diet. Kirtana, is there anything specific you recommend to people who are in chronic stress lifestyle that cannot be changed for better gut health? Let's see, anything chronic stress lifestyle? Yeah, great question. So, a lot of the stress that goes on in the body, it's due to high levels of cortisol, right? So cortisol is the stress hormone that our bodies release. A lot of times people find that they wake up in the mornings and they're not hungry, right? So this is a sign of high cortisol. And what happens when we're under a state of stress, our body starts to shut down all other signals, all other processes that might be going on, even the digestion, even the hunger signal, right? A lot of people may wake up and have a cup of coffee in the morning. This will immediately spike up the cortisol, and it will also shut down hunger, right? So waking up, not feeling hungry, adding the cup of coffee, increasing the stress even more, shutting down the hunger, right? And then the blood sugars will continue to drop despite the fact that you're hungry, your brain can't recognize it. So providing support by decreasing cortisol is really important. Taking out components in your diet that are contributing to the higher cortisol levels, such as caffeine, if there's any stressful factors that are going on in your life, and making sure that you are getting proper nutrients throughout the day, especially starting the day with a really healthy breakfast that contains good protein, healthy fats, rather than a breakfast that's high in sugars or carbohydrates. You might notice a big difference in your digestion and your overall health. Okay. Come on, I take probiotic, but not prebiotic. Remind me what foods for prebiotic. Yes. So the prebiotics can be found in certain vegetables like artichoke, asparagus. They can also be found in plantains, also things like garlic and onions. And I'll share the slides with you as well. So there you can see also some of the supplements like the psyllium husk we talked about, or the acacia fiber. Yeah, you're welcome. Never know about not being hungry on morning. So Megan, are you referring to the fact that you do feel hungry in the mornings? I hope that's true. That's a great sign if you are. All right, great. So as we wrap up, I just want to emphasize again that if anyone is going through any type of gut health issues, whether it's having digestive issues or mental health issues, brain fog, fatigue, just understanding that this is a process, right? So you didn't get to where you are overnight. It's something that happened over a course of months or even years. So giving your body the time that it needs to heal is really important, and really taking the time to understand your body, listening to it, and knowing that the same thing doesn't work for everyone, right? So something we see on the internet or something we hear from a friend or a family member, that might not necessarily work for you. So taking the time to really figure out how to help heal your body and give it what it needs. And that's why taking a functional medicine approach is really key. Megan, I'm never usually hungry in the morning. Okay. Yeah. And that's something that I hear very commonly from people, is not being hungry in the morning. So this can be very individualized depending on the individual and what's contributing to it. So typically not being hungry in the morning isn't a very good sign, because it means that despite the fact that you haven't eaten for a long period of time, your body's been fasting overnight. Let's say you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. You should wake up feeling hungry in the morning, especially if you had dinner about 3 hours before bed. Example, going to bed at 10 p.m., you had dinner at 7 p.m., and you wake up again at 7 a.m., but you're not feeling hungry despite fasting for 12 hours. So this could, again, be a sign that your body is operating under stress in the mornings. Especially a lot of us wake up, we have a routine, we have to get things done. Our body is prioritizing all of that instead of the fact that we have to sit down, we have to eat, we have to give our bodies nutrients. And the energy that we get is coming from the food, right? So how are we supposed to function properly if we're not giving our bodies energy, the nutrients from things like protein, amino acids, even sugars from carbohydrates can be helpful when they're balanced into our diet properly. And healthy fats, right? So the healthy fats are really critical for fighting inflammation. A lot of the key hormones that we produce, the starting molecule is actually cholesterol, right? So the good cholesterol is really necessary for making a lot of hormones in the body. Food suggestions for cyclical vomiting syndrome for a patient. I've already referred them. Oh, okay. Thank you, Allison. Yeah. So oh gosh, yeah. So cyclical vomiting. So again, just really figuring out what the imbalance is in the gut that's triggering it, right? So the vomiting is all starting in the gut. And you might notice that a lot of times when you do have nausea, you also have a feeling in your gut. There's an imbalance. There's some pain usually going on. Something doesn't feel right. So it's triggered by the gut. A lot of people find, things like ginger or home remedies can be helpful for healing vomiting or helping the nausea feeling. But figuring out the root cause of what's causing it, whether it's a food sensitivity, an imbalance in the gut, or certain types of infections, it's going to be really important to do some of those testings we talked about, whether it's a stool analysis or some blood tests, so we can figure out where the elimination needs to start to help heal the gut. Any other questions? All right, great. Well, I want to thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate you all being here and really taking the time to learn more about how to help support your gut, heal your gut, right? And I hope that this has been informative. And if there's anything else that you want to learn about, I do encourage you to come back for our next workshop. The next one will be on intermittent fasting. This is going to be really important for learning about what is fasting, is it appropriate for you, how to properly fast, and what are some of the benefits that you can get from intermittent fasting. Yes. Yeah. So Christy, this is being recorded, and it's going to be emailed out to all the participants. So you can see the slides, you can see the information. And if there's anything, you're always welcome to reach out via email. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. And I really appreciate you all. I hope you have a great night.